Hello, everyone, and welcome to Technical Tuesday. Today, we'll discuss factors to consider when designing emergency lighting systems. Before we get to today's speakers, I want to offer you the opportunity to take a look at the latest information on smart building design. The Art of Possible, Buildings for a Better Tomorrow, is available for an encore viewing at our website, electrification.us.abb.com. Look under the Resources tab at our Webinar Center, or just pull out your phone now and scan the QR code displayed. I'll give you a moment to do that. Whether you're revisiting it, or if this is your first view of the Art is Possible, know that you're getting the most up-to-date information on this important topic. Okay, let's get to it. We're pleased to welcome Ron Riel, ABB's Market Development Manager for Emergency Lighting here in the U.S. Ron has a lot of time in the saddle and is a respected voice in the industry. He's joined by James Smith, Product Specialist with ABB Emergency Lighting. Gentlemen, welcome to Technical Tuesday. And Ron, I'll hand it off to you to kick things off.
Thank you, Phil, for the introduction, and thank you to everyone for attending this call. Today, we are going to present the ABB Nexus Pro Emergency Lighting Monitoring System. But before we do, I'm going to present a common scenario that brings us to the reason for considering the Nexus Pro system in your facility. Imagine you are the facilities manager responsible for all life safety systems in your building or buildings in which you are employed. In this case, we are discussing the emergency lighting system. The total number of traditional emergency lighting units and exits in this scenario are greater than 500. Your actual circumstance could be more or less. The monthly compliance testing requires a team to perform 30-second tests by manually pushing test switches for all devices in a 90-minute test once a year. The number of hours associated with the monthly regime has become inefficient in terms of labor costs. The testing requires every person to carry a ladder, perform the test, record the results, and identify parts necessary if any units are malfunctioning, which may result in having to place an order for parts, thus rendering those units non-functioning until those parts are received and installed. Upon completion of the testing each month, logging of the results are required in order to reproduce testing history to the AHJ, which is the authority having jurisdiction. As you can see, the process has become laborious and expensive, but absolutely necessary and required in order to ensure the safety of all inhabitants within the building or buildings. As you will learn today, ABB's Nexus Pro system will make this process much easier, more cost-effective, and more precise in ensuring that your emergency lighting system is functioning as it should. ABB will work with you to ensure Nexus Pro is successfully installed by offering complimentary site evaluations, help select products based on application, perform photometric calculations, provide bill of materials, and gateway location placements. Nexus Pro is an intelligent emergency lighting monitoring system. In the age of IoT, digital connectivity is driving change and innovation. The push towards smarter, efficient, and more secure buildings is opening the door to endless possibilities. Today, you will discover ABB's smart emergency lighting solution controlled completely from your smart device. Nexus Pro gives you an IoT solution with a high level of cybersecurity for safety and reliability, and enables better maintenance planning and reduced operating costs. Let's briefly visit code compliance in the U.S. for non-residential buildings. As stated in our scenario, exit signs in emergency lighting units must be tested every 30 days for 30 seconds and once a year for a full discharge test of 90 minutes. The results of these tests must be recorded and be reproducible for compliance verification to the authority having jurisdiction. As the slide shows, computer-based testing is allowable by code. ABB Emergency Lighting offers a wide variety of exit and emergency lighting units that are Nexus Pro compatible to satisfy most applications. We continue to upgrade and expand our product offerings to ensure that all potential applications can benefit from the wide variety of products that are Nexus Pro ready. The ABB Emergency Lighting product line incorporates high LED sources throughout the offering. IES photometric files are available for each product. On the slide, we show examples of different LED choices to cover a 150-foot hallway, ranging from 9 to 5, 3, 2, and even 1 unit is available to cover that space. Obviously, choosing a higher performing lamp combination resulting in increased spacing between units equates to less labor to install, maintain, and an overall reduction in total cost of the system. When a Nexus Pro system is in the design stages, we obtain the life safety evacuation plan from the facility. We start by loading our lighting software with the IES file representing the best performing LED source that we offer in an effort to reduce the total number of units necessary to achieve an average of 1 foot candle on the path of egress as required by national code. As the process continues, we work with the client on the final selection of products that best suit the application based on product characteristics and cost. Nexus Pro allows the end user to schedule testing for the appropriate duration and intervals automatically or at any time. The system not only tests the devices, it will also notify the user of any units requiring replacement parts by catalog number. And, of course, the system also records all history of tests performed to be accessed at any time. In summary, safety and protection. Comply with building and life safety codes. Real-time self-monitoring and maintenance alerts if units stop functioning. Holds all emergency lighting testing and maintenance data in a secure ABB cloud and generate reports that comply with North American life and building safety codes. Ownership of maintenance data input, quick testing, and monthly annual scheduling. Cost savings. Reduce labor costs for maintaining emergency lighting. Saving on cost and labor associated with manual collection and recording of testing data. Reduce monitoring costs by simply receiving notifications when there are non-functioning units. And get diagnostics and part number recommendations during failures. Robust cybersecurity. Cloud server environments follow strict strategies, rules, and policies made to protect data and cloud system applications. A wide range of security and solution tests ensure that customers' information and data are safe. Cloud servers are by Google Firebase. Remote monitoring. Monitor remotely anywhere at any time. Fast and easy testing with a smart device. Interactive 2D floor plan layout showcasing emergency lighting locations. And software updates are automatically applied. Scalable and flexible. Easily go from one building to many with our scalable system, and up to 200 emergency lighting units or exits on one gateway. And for the building owners and facility managers, 24/7 control of safety level in your building. Total cost of ownership is reduced. Fewer interruptions for work activities. Optimize safety for your employees, and expandable to meet your changing needs. James Smith will now go into more details on how the Nexus Pro system works. Thank you, James.
Thanks, Ron. Hello, everybody. So as Ron mentioned, I'll be going into some more details about how Nexus Pro works. And our first starting off point will be this little block diagram that we'll be working through together. So for those of you who may or may not be familiar with emergency lighting in general, there are a couple of basic factors to consider at the unit level. So we'll start over here on the left-hand side of the block diagram in front of us. So that's our emergency luminaire. Now, an emergency lighting luminaire that is self-powered will have two main components. The first of which is the battery. The idea of having a battery inside of these units is to illuminate the lighting elements, whether it be LED, halogen, HID, fluorescent, etc., during an emergency situation. Now, to make sure that this battery is fully functional and able to meet those discharge times that Ron mentioned, either a 30-second monthly test or a 90-minute annual test, we have a charger board that is incorporated into the fixture. Now, this will periodically make sure that the battery is topped up, as it were, and that it is ready to function in an emergency situation. Now, when we're looking at a smart technology like Nexus Pro, we have to add an extra element. And that extra element that is going to provide some communication between the fixtures is what we call our communication module, or our COM module. So this is an add-on that we would add on to an existing emergency lighting fixture from our factory. And this will allow the units to communicate with each other and ultimately back to our gateway. That is the next element in our block diagram here, which is our ABB gateway. Now the gateway, if you would, can be akin to a kind of jumping off point. This is where all of the information passed between the fixtures will be relayed back to our cloud server and ultimately back to the end user, that facility manager that Ron mentioned a few minutes ago. We'll talk about how the gateways communicate with the emergency lighting luminaires in more detail in just a little bit, but we'll move forward by looking at how the gateway communicates with the cloud. So that's the next element in our block diagram here, which is the router. And for those of you who have internet at home, you'll understand that this is an internet-based system, and the router is used to access the internet. The Nexus Pro is an internet-based system, which means that the gateway requires a connection to the internet to communicate, whether it be passing that testing information or passing testing schedules or anything related to the emergency lighting luminaire. Always making sure that whatever data is transmitted is non-proprietary and is kept safe from any unwanted eyes. So the internet is our bridge between our gateway and our fixtures to the cloud. As Ron mentioned, Nexus Pro is a cloud-based system. Seeing as we are in the 21st century and as a leader in technological development, ABB has always strived to be at the forefront of technologies that are available and utilizing those to bring real benefits to the end user, to the customer. So this is a cloud-based system, Ron mentioned that we do use Google Firebase as our third-party supplier for our cloud services. We'll talk about some of the benefits of this technology in just a second. Now, once we've used this cloud server, this cloud technology from Google Firebase, we need to display this testing information. We need to display the status of the emergency lighting fixtures to that facilities manager. So how do we do that? Well, there are a couple of ways. And that's what we're going to look at, our app. So we have two versions of the application, the Nexus Pro application. We have a version available on iOS, for you Apple fans, and we have an Android version for those of you who are, Android inclined. We also have a version that's available as a web browser as well. So this isn't necessarily an app itself. It's a web link that you just put into any common internet browser that you'd have, such as Microsoft Edge, Firefox, Google Chrome, any one of those, and you'll be able to see all the information that you would see on the application, whether it be iOS or Android. So the idea behind this is to allow the customer as much flexibility as possible, whether they like having it in their pocket or in the palm of their hand or at a computer somewhere where they can monitor it from the ease of their office or their desk. So without further ado, let's get into more details about how the system actually communicates. That is our next slide. So this is another diagram showing how the system communicates. And it's an excellent segue to talk about the technology that's used within the system. So the Nexus Pro system uses Bluetooth technology to communicate between the fixtures as well as back to the gateway. That's what we see right here, in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. So the emergency lighting luminaires communicate with each other using a technology called Bluetooth Mesh, or BTM for short. This means that every single emergency lighting fixture acts as both a transmitter and a receiver of all information that's being transmitted. As I mentioned earlier, whether it be testing information, scheduling, stuff like that. This means that the system is a lot more robust, that each fixture can transmit, testing information to another unit and ultimately making its way back to the gateway. This eliminates very hardwired or hard-coded communication paths back to either a router or a gateway. So our Bluetooth Mesh is our communication back to the gateway. As we mentioned earlier, the internet is our bridge between the gateway to our cloud server, which is Google Firebase. And the internet also is our bridge back to our mobile or web application. So Bluetooth Mesh is something to remember in the communication for Nexus Pro. This is the latest and greatest technology out of the Bluetooth Special Interest Group, or Bluetooth SIG group, which communicates on a 2.4 gigahertz frequency. So this is a very widely used communication protocol, and it has been tried and tested by not only our R&D groups internally, but also by other customers using Bluetooth technology. Now, for those of you who are saying, well, I've never heard of Bluetooth Mesh before, but I have heard of the Bluetooth that's on my phone, well, that's where our little dotted lines come into play in our drawing here. So on the left side of the screen, we have a Bluetooth drawing here, and we have another one here. So this technology is called BLE, Bluetooth Low Energy. This is the same technology you'd use to communicate with a wireless speaker at home, whether it be a kind of an Alexa device or a Google Smart Home. This is that kind of Bluetooth. It's very short range. And what we use it for in Nexus Pro is what we call in the commissioning process. So when you order your Nexus Pro fixtures and order your gateway and you install them all inside your nice building, well, you have to kind of assemble them all together. And that's where this commissioning process comes into play. So this is where you'll link the emergency lighting fixtures to the gateway, and you'll create this little network. Once this network is connected, that's when our technology of Bluetooth Mesh will take over. That's when the fixtures will communicate with each other to make sure that they get that information back to the user on their mobile application. So we're using two distinct types of Bluetooth communication protocols here, both BLE, Bluetooth Low Energy, for the commissioning side of the process, and we're using Bluetooth Mesh, or BTM, to allow the units to communicate back to the gateway and transmit their status to the end user. Moving right along, this is some more information about our gateway itself. So Ron mentioned that the gateway is able to support 200 emergency lighting fixtures on a single gateway. And this drawing does a very good job of showing how all of the fixtures communicate with each other. So every single fixture, as I mentioned, acts as a transmitter and a receiver. So if our sign down here in the bottom left-hand corner of the screen were to have a fault for whatever reason, whether a charger failure or the battery is not discharging properly or one of the lamps is burned out, well, it will send out that signal to all of the fixtures that are nearby. It'll send it to this one, it'll send it to this one, it'll send it to this one, and it'll send it to this one. So it's making sure that every single fixture that you can see has that information. Once each one of them receives that encrypted signal, it will do the same thing. It will send it to every single fixture that it can see. That's why we have all these little crosses and dotted lines here. And ultimately, that information will work its way back to the gateway. So this kind of setup that we have here is what's called a flooding topology. We are flooding the gateway with information to make sure that it ultimately will find its way home, back to the gateway, and ultimately back to the end user. We are fully compliant with both FCC and CRTC for the US and Canada respectively in terms of RF radiation. So these are common certification bodies that monitor the emissions coming out of a particular device when you're looking at RF communication. As far as the communication from the gateway back to the cloud server, as I mentioned, the internet is our medium of information passing. So we are fully capable of supporting both Wi-Fi and a wired Ethernet connection. And in the Wi-Fi spectrum, we can accommodate both 2.4 gigahertz and 5 gigahertz frequencies. So we cover a wide range of communication options for a customer that would prefer one over the other. So it's fully capable to meet whatever needs they have. The cloud server technology. So here at ABB, we pride ourselves on being up to date with cybersecurity, making sure that customers' information is safe, making sure that their networks are protected, and that they can still make use of the fantastic benefits that a system like this has, both in terms of the testing, to ease the testing, to automate it, as well as ensuring that their maintenance costs go down and ultimately save them money at the end of the day. So cloud server technology has all kinds of benefits in that you don't need to have a physical server. You don't need to have something in the building running 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, pulling all kinds of power and jacking up your electricity bill. It's also very scalable, which means that it can accommodate all the way from a very, very small system, such as one emergency lighting fixture and a gateway, all the way up to hundreds and hundreds of fixtures on dozens and dozens of gateways. So this allows us to have a competitive edge in that we're able to scale our systems to quite a large extent. So you're not just going after customers or going after applications that will have very small impacts, but you can really look at organizations as a whole. If you want to talk about specifics, maybe think of a university complex where you may not have just a single building, but you'll have a whole complex of buildings. So cloud servers allow us to handle that level of information, that level of complexity very easily. Now, as far as cybersecurity is concerned, we take pride in making sure that the system is safe on all fronts. So the first front being at the application level. So as I mentioned earlier, our application is both iOS and Android compatible, which means that it goes through extensive vetting by both our ABB internal development team, as well as the respective app publishers, so whether it be Apple or Android. So we make sure that the app is fully secure before releasing any new updates or any kind of preliminary versions of the application to the customer. So it's rock solid. At the platform level, when we're talking about the gateway, well, the gateway has what we call a trusted platform module on it, which means that it has the encryption keys hard-coded into it. To give maybe an analogy as to how secure this device is, if you could imagine for a moment the world's top hacker, Mr. Anonymous, for example, somebody who is at the cutting edge of hacking technology, can hack anything that they can get their hands on. Well, for our gateway, if they had the gateway in their hands and all the latest hacking technology available, they still would not be able to access the encryption codes that are inside of the gateway. To your point, for those of you who are wondering, well, what information is being transmitted? As I mentioned, the only information that's being transmitted from fixture to fixture and back to the gateway is information about the emergency lighting system. So testing information, unit status, battery status, information like that. There's no proprietary information, no credit card numbers, none of that, no addresses. So the information that even they would get their hands on is not exactly very valuable. Now the last part of our equation here is infrastructure. So when we're talking about IT infrastructure, our Nexus Pro system is fully capable of integrating with any and all network and network firewalls that some customers may have. The system can be as simple as just being placed on an open network, a regular network, where there are minor network security measures in place. However, it can also interface with very high levels of firewall protection that are on the customer's network. So we have all kinds of capabilities at the wired level where you need to enter dedicated IP addresses, specific DNS server information, to really make sure that this unit will accurately communicate through the particular firewall while keeping their network safe. We built all of this technology into the application and into the gateway to make sure that the customer is safe. Now, when we talk about the system layout, what does that mean? So for those of you who may not have an idea of what an emergency lighting layout would look like, this is a very simplistic model. And this is what we call a single point unit model. So we have our battery units, which we can see here, and they're scattered all over the building. These are what we call single point units because they do have a battery backup within them. We also have our exit signs for those of you who are in the US. We also, for those of you who may be from Canada or elsewhere abroad, you may recognize these as a pictogram sign. So a green background with a white running man on them. However, these designate the way out of the building. So these you can see spotted all the way around the site here. Again, we must assume that these are self-powered units, so single point units. So these units have a battery backup in them. As a note, Nexus Pro is a system that can only work with battery backup or single point fixtures. We are not able to run these off of dedicated AC only fixtures, which means that these fixtures would be running off of a 120 or 277 volt entrance. Okay, so these can only run off battery backup units. The Nexus Pro is only able to monitor battery backup units. So as we can see here, we have these all across the building with various doors leading towards exit points, as well as single point fixtures to light up your path of egress, as Ron mentioned. And as a very simplistic way of looking at it, we have these little dotted lines showing the communication of all the fixtures. The reality is it's a bit more complex, seeing as each fixture will communicate with every single other fixture it can see, but this gives you a very basic idea of how the system communicates, ultimately working its way back to the gateway, which is here. Gateways ideally are centrally located within a site. Make sure that the units accurately communicate that information back to the customer. So that's our first basic layout of how an emergency lighting system could be laid out within a building. Another setup that we have is using something called a mini inverter. So unlike a single point unit or a self-powered unit, which has an internal battery, mini inverters act as a large battery bank. Now, instead of just powering two little lights on the top of the fixture, a mini inverter will actually send out AC power. So it'll send out either 120 or 277 volts to existing lighting fixtures inside of a particular building. This has all kinds of fantastic applications when you start looking at architectural lighting, especially for customers who have spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on very, very pretty lighting to make their building look gorgeous, and then you slap some single point fixtures on the walls, which take away from that aesthetic. So a mini inverter is a nice option to keep that existing lighting in place and use it for your path of egress. So we have our mini inverter here, which is also Nexus Pro compatible, and that means that we can monitor the status of the battery on the mini inverter. So we are unable to look at which particular lighting load may have failed, but we are able to detect a load drop on the mini inverter. So we're still able to monitor if a particular load or if a particular multiple loads have gone down on an inverter. So that will point you in the right direction as to which fixtures need to be replaced. And as you can see here, we also have our exit signage in place. So again, we have to assume that these exit signs, are self-powered, which means they have a battery in them. And these will all, again, work their way back to communicating with the gateway. Again, a very simplistic model. Now, those are very simple models of buildings, but now how scalable is Nexus? So Nexus can do anything from, as I mentioned earlier, a single emergency lighting fixture and a gateway, working all the way up to, well, there is no limit. There's no limit to the number of gateways or to the number of fixtures that you can have in a building connected to a particular client's application. The only limit that we do have in place, as we mentioned earlier, is that 200 fixtures per gateway. So if you have a building, say, with 400 fixtures in it, well, then you need to have 2 gateways installed in your building, connected to the customer's internet connection, right? Because that's how we're going to make our bridge back to the internet. So you can start off with a very simple system of having a single room. And as you add progressive rooms onto your building, let's say as an example, well, you can progressively add units to your site. So you can start very small and build and build and build as you and your renovation projects or your expansion projects move forward. So Nexus Pro can scale as customers scale, to whatever limit they want to scale their business. Now, can Nexus Pro work with sites that are in not necessarily close proximity? These 3 buildings that we're looking at here are all very near to each other. And that's the beauty of using a cloud system with internet as our communication method, because it allows us to monitor sites that are nowhere near each other. If it were the case and you wanted to monitor all of the, let's say, the McDonald's store franchises in New York, but the headquarters of the particular building that monitors the maintenance of McDonald's is located in Los Angeles. Well, the facilities manager in Los Angeles could accurately monitor the status of their emergency lighting in all of the franchises in New York from across the country. That is the power of cloud servers and of using an internet-based communication protocol. So it allows that long-distance communication and getting instant information, live information about the sites in question that are being monitored. Now, when we're talking about testing and how Nexus Pro handles this, we can also do something called groups. And this allows for, in the highly unlikely case, but still something to be aware of, that you have an emergency after your annual discharge test is complete. So for those who may not necessarily be following, let's assume that you ran your annual discharge test yesterday, and it just finished. It just finished an hour and a half ago, it hasn't had time to fully recharge the batteries, because the code states that after a full discharge test, the unit has 24 hours to completely recharge its battery. So the unit is still in process of recharging its battery. However, during that time, there is a fault. There is a power line that goes down. There's a transformer that explodes. Who knows what the emergency might be, but your building loses power. So that means that some of your emergency lighting fixtures, the ones that ran the test, won't be functioning properly. So the reason why we recommend using groups in our Nexus Pro technology is because it allows the units to not all be tested all at the same time. So that if that eventuality does happen and there is a disastrous situation just after your full discharge test, your 90-minute runtime test, well, you'll at least have some fixtures that are online and at full capacity ready to illuminate that path of egress for customers. So that's something that we have available on our system. And we've highlighted it here by circling the units in different colors. So we have some units that are circled in green. They'll be tested on, let's say, Monday. We have certain units that are tested in blue. They'll be tested on Tuesday. And we have some units that are circled in yellow, and they'll be tested on Wednesday. So this breaks up the testing schedule, and it allows for units to still be functional in an emergency situation. Now, how are these units being monitored? Well, as I mentioned, we have a couple of different ways that this information can be viewed. So the first of which, on the left, is our application. Now, we've only selected a couple of snapshots of the application. In this particular case, it's the iOS application. But this is how you get the viewport into your site. So there are two different ways. The first is a list view. So this is where you'll see all of the different fixtures that are set up on your system, listed in a kind of a tabular function. So there's a picture of what the unit will look like to give you a more of a visual understanding of which fixture is installed where. There's a name that can be assigned to each one of the fixtures. So these are assigned during that commissioning process that I mentioned earlier. And then there's a little indicator on the right-hand side, which is either going to be a green check mark, as you see here, or a red X if the fixture is not functioning properly. Another way you can view this information to ease maintenance is in what we call a map view. So the customer can load in a PNG file or a picture file of their particular site, and as they're going around and commissioning the fixtures, they can place these fixtures one by one on the map. So it gives you a visual representation of where each of these emergency lighting fixtures are located within the building. Very, very clear to understand, and a very simple way of seeing the status of your site as a whole. Another way to view your information is through our web interface. That's the one located on the right. This provides the same information that you would see on the iOS application, just on a computer. So for some people, they'd find that a little bit easier to understand, to digest, excuse me, especially if you're working with larger sites and multiple sites located across multiple kind of geographic regions. The only element to remember is that the actual commissioning process can only be done using kind of a mobile device, so using our application, not using the web interface. Now, as far as communication ranges are concerned, so for those of you who are wondering, well, we use the Bluetooth Low Energy, BLE, for the commissioning process. Well, why can't we reuse that for the communication as well? Why have two different kinds of Bluetooth communication? That's a great question. Bluetooth Low Energy operates over very short distances. So it allows you to talk to your wireless speaker. It allows you to commission a fixture that's mounted 8 or 10 feet in the air. However, for a system like Nexus Pro, we can't assume that these fixtures are going to be right next to each other. With the high-performing LEDs that we have in our product offering, as Ron mentioned earlier, we were able to go get distances of upwards of 100 feet center to center between units, which means that we have to have a technology that matches those kinds of performances. That's why Bluetooth Mesh, BTM, is our preferred communication protocol, because you can go and get communication ranges of 100 feet between the gateway and the first fixture, and 130 feet, fixture to fixture. This is a rule of thumb. It assumes that there are certain obstacles in the way. Obstacles that you would find in an everyday type situation. Gyprock walls, 8-inch cinder block walls, stuff like that. Now, when we compare this to an older technology that we had called Nexus RF, which was a predecessor to Nexus Pro, we weren't getting those types of communication ranges. We were only getting about 100 feet unit to unit. So we've had a 30% increase in our unit's communication performance, which is really, really incredible, seeing as we have lighting packages, LED packages, that can meet these kinds of communication ranges. As far as showing how the systems differ in terms of communication between Nexus RF and Nexus Pro, we've moved away from this very hard-coded communication method, where one unit only spoke to one fixture that was near it, it only spoke to a designated one, so on and so forth. Nexus Pro, as I mentioned earlier, uses that flooding topology, which means that it sends this information to every single fixture it can see to make sure that that information ultimately works its way back to the gateway and ultimately back to the customer. So what does this mean in terms of a paradigm shift, if you will, or how these systems have gone, how we've improved these systems, and kind of always pushing the boundaries of the technological feats that we can accomplish with ABB? Well, Nexus Pro is a cloud-based system, which, as I mentioned, uses that 2.4 gigahertz frequency to communicate between fixtures. In the past, we had to set up local servers, and we can only use the 900 megahertz frequency. So we've really updated the way that the units can communicate and making use of those really, really nice performances, both in terms of lighting as well as communication distances. We've moved away from just having a simple web browser. We've moved to having a mobile application, which means that customers can always be aware of the status of their emergency lighting on the go and on demand, seeing as Nexus Pro is a live system. We can now import 2D floor plans into the site, which means that we can now see those beautiful map views that we saw earlier to really give a clear picture and a clear status of the emergency lighting system that they have in their building, versus only having a list view in the older technology. Always, innovating and making sure that we're able to provide the clearest information to the customer. We have something called push notifications, akin to getting a text message on your phone, which will automatically let you know if any fault is detected in the system, whether it be a charger failure, battery failure, lamp failure, or any kind of failure like that. It will automatically send you a notification on your phone detailing which fixture is having trouble. And when you move further into the application, it'll bring you right to the fixture on the map, showing you where it's having an issue. And if there are any parts that would need to be reordered, it'll automatically generate a list of part numbers that you can order from an ABB representative. And lastly, we've doubled the amount of fixtures that we can have per gateway. So in Nexus Pro, as I mentioned, we can have 200 fixtures per gateway, versus in the old system, we only had 100. So we're ultimately trying to reduce the amount of things that the customer needs to include in their system, points of failure. So we're trying to make sure the system is as robust as possible. So this is a very clear example of how at ABB we're always pushing to innovate. We're always pushing to be the leaders technologically. And that's what we've done with our latest and greatest system, Nexus Pro. So to close, and as Ron mentioned, here at ABB, we're here to support the customer 100% from start to finish on their particular project, especially for Nexus Pro. So we're available to do anything from site evaluations, walking facilities, walking plants, walking a building, giving recommendations in the field of how we can better improve their emergency lighting setup. We're also there to help with product selection, so to help guide them through the selecting process of which fixture would meet their application the best, whether it be an E4X application, a hazardous lighting location, an industrial location, or even just a simple commercial or architectural application. We're there to support them 100% of the way. We're also able to perform photometry calculations, so to look at the spacing between fixtures and give them a real view of what their site will look like when the power goes out, when the lights turn on. So they get a clear picture of how our product is performing in those emergency style situations. What accompany these kind of investigative or kind of product selection activities are bill of materials. So a site evaluation or a site walk, using products and doing photometry calculations will give you that bill of material that you can then quote with an electrical distributor or with whoever you buy ABB emergency lighting products. So we're there to support that step 100% of the way. And lastly, when it comes to gateway locations, looking at how RF signals interfere within particular buildings, we're there to support that 100% of the way as well. So working with the customer, helping to find locations for the gateway, make sure that their system is as robust as possible and will not encounter defects or hidden ghosts, let's say, when it's installed at a particular site. So as it says there, we work with you, we work with the customer to make sure that Nexus Pro is a smooth and easy to implement system to ultimately save them money and ensure that their emergency lighting is being tested to code. So with that, I'll pass it back to you, Phil. Thank you very much, everybody, for your time.
All right, great. Thank you, James.